If you can code and you can think clearly, then something fundamental has changed for you. Not gradually, structurally. In the AI era, you no longer need permission to try being a founder, and if you've been laid off, stalled in hiring loops, or quietly losing confidence while waiting for the next role, this matters more than you think. Because this moment isn't about motivation, it's about changed constraints. In this video, we're going to talk about why entrepreneurship used to be irrational for most technical people, what AI actually changed beneath the surface, and why the risk profile of founding has quietly flipped. This is not a how-to guide. It's not about tools or tactics. It's about understanding why, for the first time in decades, trying has become the rational option. Let's start with what the world used to look like. AI has changed who gets to be a founder. Not in a gradual way, and not as an incremental improvement. What we're experiencing is a structural transformation in entrepreneurship, one that's irreversible, profound, and still hiding in plain sight. Most conversations about AI focus on tools or productivity. This is not that conversation. This is about access, about permission, about who is now rationally allowed to attempt building a company. If you have a technical background, this shift applies to you directly, and once you see it clearly, it becomes very hard to unsee. For decades, founding a startup required extraordinary personal and financial sacrifice, not because founders were reckless, but because the system was unforgiving. You gave up a stable salary, you stalled your career trajectory, you risked reputation, identity, and time. Worst of all, feedback was brutally slow. You could spend years building something, only to discover the market simply didn't care. This wasn't entrepreneurship as experimentation. It was entrepreneurship as sacrifice. Under those conditions, avoiding founding wasn't weakness, it was rational behavior. To start a company in the past, 4 gates had to be cleared simultaneously. You needed deep domain experience to even understand the problem space. You needed co-founders to cover skills you didn't have. You needed capital to survive long stretches without revenue. And you needed time, often years, with no guarantee of learning or success. These were not optional advantages, they were prerequisites. Without all 4, starting a company wasn't brave, it was irrational, especially for engineers who understood opportunity cost. For engineers, the downside was asymmetric. Failure didn't just mean a product didn't work. It meant years evaporated. It meant a visible scar on your resume. It meant financial instability and unclear recovery paths. Engineers didn't avoid entrepreneurship out of fear or lack of ambition. They optimized for stability because the system punished early mistakes harshly. Avoidance wasn't cowardice. It was mathematically correct behavior given the constraints of the time. Those old constraints didn't gradually loosen. They shattered. What held true for decades no longer applies. And this is the key transition point in the story. When constraints collapse one by one, behavior changes slowly. But when multiple constraints collapse together, behavior must change immediately. That is what AI introduced. Not a new tool, but a new structural reality. And once structure changes, the old rules stop working. The shallow narrative says AI makes engineers faster at writing code. That story misses the point entirely. The real shift is structural. AI collapsed the infrastructure required to start a company. Learning timelines compressed. Team requirements shrank. Risk profiles fundamentally changed. AI is not a feature. It's infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't just make things faster. It changes who can participate at all. The first barrier to collapse was domain knowledge. Previously, entering a new industry required years of immersion, learning jargon, regulations, workflows, and unspoken norms. With AI, that learning compresses dramatically. Not perfectly, but fast enough to be functional. You no longer need a decade inside healthcare, finance, logistics, or law to speak fluently. AI accelerates comprehension without eliminating depth. Domain entry shifted from a decade-long investment into a sprint, and that alone expands the founder pool enormously. The second barrier is execution speed. Solo founders can now prototype, test, and iterate at speeds that once required entire teams. Feedback loops that used to take quarters now take days. This isn't just faster development, it's faster learning. You discover what works and what doesn't before burning runway, reputation, or years of your life. Speed doesn't guarantee success, but it dramatically lowers the cost of being wrong. The third barrier is team size. Early stage companies no longer require full teams on day one. AI substitutes for design, research, copywriting, and even initial customer support. Coordination overhead drops to near zero. Decision velocity increases. You move at the speed of thought, not consensus. This doesn't eliminate teams. It delays them until validation exists. And delaying commitment is another way risk collapses. When learning becomes cheap, execution becomes fast, and team size shrinks, the risk profile of entrepreneurship changes fundamentally. Founding is no longer a leap. It becomes an experiment. Time-boxed, hypothesis-driven, reversible, exits are clearer. Returning to employment carries less stigma. Entrepreneurship used to be binary, everything or nothing. Now it's iterative, and that changes the math entirely. Layoffs feel like failure. Emotionally, they're destabilizing. But structurally, they unlock optionality. Without a stable job anchoring you to the status quo, the opportunity cost of experimentation collapses. The risk of trying drops below the risk of waiting. Layoffs don't create founders, but they remove inertia. What feels like losing stability is often gaining flexibility. The constraint that held you in place just disappeared. Under the old logic, entrepreneurship was high risk and employment was stability. The rational choice was to stay employed unless you had unfair advantages. That logic flipped. In the AI era, not experimenting may be riskier than experimenting. Waiting decays skills, confidence, and relevance quietly. Trying now, carefully and deliberately, has become the lower risk option for many technical founders. This isn't about optimism, it's about updated math. AI handles execution brilliantly. It writes, researches, builds, and iterates at inhuman speed. But it cannot decide what matters. It cannot tell you which problems are real, which signals are noise, when to pivot, or when to stop. The constraint shifted from execution to perception. Judgment, taste, timing, psychological discipline is now the bottleneck, and that is not automatable. TaBIS exists to develop the judgment layer, the thing AI cannot replace. This series is not about tools, not about growth hacks, not about templates or scripts. It's about learning to see clearly in conditions of uncertainty, to decide well when information is abundant and misleading, to act without certainty but without delusion. This is training perception, not productivity. In the next episode, we'll examine why founders who rely on AI to tell them what to build are already behind. The real edge isn't execution speed, it's problem selection. AI amplifies clarity, but only if clarity exists first. Stay curious, stay disciplined. See you next time.